All right, so we're going to make a quick video about genetics for the folks that happen to not be here. And as we're talking about genetics, and I look at my anchor charts and I look at the things that we need to know, by the end of this, you should be able to identify learned traits, acquired traits, and inherited traits. You should be able to identify those. And the reason why is you need to know what comes from your parents, what comes from your environment, and what types of things that you learn. We also need to know the same thing for plants and animals, although I don't know that there's going to be a whole lot of learned behaviors for plants, right? But for animals, most definitely as we move on. So we're going to be talking about genetics. This is our genetics unit. We're going to skip the describing yourself. We don't need to do that today. Now, how are inherited traits, learned behaviors, and acquired traits different from each other is a very, very important key. It's going to ask you, Sydney, when we're taking the tests and the quizzes and everything else, what is this example? Is it from the parents? Is it from the environment? Or is it something that they learn? And it'll ask you examples. Which of the following is a learned characteristic? Which of the following is an inherited characteristic? All of those things that I think are fairly easy as long as you pay attention and do your vocabulary this week. We will be fine. Humans, animals, plants are a mix of their parents. Behaviors we typically learn on our own. So those of us that talk a whole lot in class doesn't necessarily mean that your parents talk a whole lot. They may, but that's who you are. The way you look, your hair color, your hairstyle, your eye shape, your eye color, your nose shape, your ear shape, attached versus detached earlobes. Can you roll your tongue? Can you not roll your tongue? The way that you clasp your hands, right-handed versus left-handed. How tall are you? All of those things are inherited from our parents. And those are things that are going to be passed on from the parent to the offspring. And offspring is just a fancy way of saying kids. First thing I wrote down, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to write it down again, is genetics. And genetics is the study of traits, behaviors, and how they are inherited or they are acquired. So it's pretty much everything that's right here. If you want to put that in your notebook, do so now. So heredity. I don't know that I wrote that one. I did think I wrote that down. Heredity is the passing of traits and physical features from parents to their offspring. And then in that same sentence is another vocabulary word. That word is offspring, and that's just a fancy word for kids. You are the offspring of your parents. I am the offspring of my parents. I have offspring, 2 knuckleheads that live in my house that sometimes acknowledge the fact that I exist and most of the time just live in a cave and are basically in hibernation. I don't know what's going on with teenagers. But again, heredity is the passing of traits and physical features from parents to their kids. We're going to talk about what traits are in just a few moments. And when they use that word offspring in the questions that you'll see, just understand when they say the offspring of a plant, the offspring of a bear, the offspring of a human, that's just a fancy way of saying kids. All right, so in our notes, again, a repeat for a whole bunch of us because I see people aren't taking any notes. You need to go ahead and close your Chromebook if you're not going to pay attention, though. Genetics, study of traits and how they're inherited or acquired and the things that we learn. Heredity, the passing of traits from parent to offspring. We'll get to what traits are in just a moment. And then offspring is just the fancy name for children or kids. So I keep using this word traits. Traits are the characteristics of an organism, not just humans and not just animals, but plants as well. So that could be your eye color of a plant, not of a plant, but of a human or of an animal. It could be the hair color of us or the fur color of an animal. It could even be the petal color of flowers or the leaf shape or the colors that the leaves might turn in the fall. All of those things are traits that are passed on from the parent to the offspring. All right, so we talked a little bit about traits. Moving on, obviously I'll watch this with you in just a moment. If you're at home, you have to watch it later on. Same for the other videos as well. Genes. Genes are the characteristics in cells that tell you what kind of characters you'll be passed on to the children. They're the basic units of heredity. You'll dig deep into genes and genetics and alleles and all those things when I think it's 8th grade. Genes carry information that determine things like our eye color, how tall we are, our skin color, and things of that nature. Chromosomes are tiny little things inside of your cells made of DNA. They are kind of like the recipe that is used to put us together. Like if we went home and we opened up a recipe book without looking at what the title was, and we started putting certain things into the bowls and started mixing things together and follow the instructions, we would come up with something. That something could be brownies. Yes. Solid, right? Give me the brownies all day long. It could be like broiled fish. Maybe not so much for some of us, right? I think we would all dig into the brownies unless you're allergic to them. And then some of us with the broiled fish might be like, no, thank you. I think I would be okay. Depends on what kind of fish it was. And we'll talk about some of these other things down here if we get a chance later on. Dominant versus recessive genes. Dominant versus recessive genes. Dominant genes are always going to show up if you have it. For example, brown eyes, brown or black hair is dominant. If you have that gene, it is going to show up. There is no other way around it. It always overpowers the other one. The only way that you're going to see the recessive gene is if the recessive gene is also paired with another recessive gene. They have to be paired together in order for them to show up. And I'll take some time and kind of show you the math version of that here in just a moment. But dominant and recessive genes are very important. All right, so I'm looking around. Hopefully everybody's getting these notes in their notebook because I don't see a whole lot of notebooks out. But dominant genes, they always show up if they're present because they overpower, they dominate the recessive genes. Some of those examples are like black hair and brown eyes. However, the recessive gene only shows up if it's paired with another recessive gene. Blue eyes and red hair are just a couple examples of that. Moving on. We'll watch this video in just a moment. Here are a list of things that you could consider inherited traits. Inherited traits, if we look on the anchor chart, should be up there. We'll put it on this next one. Inherited traits are traits that are passed on from your parents to you. So again, inherited traits. Please put that away whatever you're looking at because it's not what we're doing right now. Matter of fact, just shut your Chromebook. Inherited traits are passed from your parent, from the parent to the kid. As we look around the room, how tall you are came from your parents. Your hair color came from your parents. Your eye color came from your parents. Your skin color came from your parents. If you have freckles, parents. Whatever hand you use, parents. All of those are inherited traits. There's the list right there. Some of those we might know what they are. Some of those we may not know what those are. So we'll take a look at some of those. We'll watch this in a few moments. Attached earlobes, detached earlobes. Looking around the room, Jonathan has detached earlobes. Detached earlobes. I'm sure you got that from his parents. Detached earlobes. Looks like detached earlobes over here. Detached. I see some attached earlobes over here. Yours is detached as well. Again, came from your parents. I promise I'll get your question in a few moments. A widow's peak. Do you see this V shape in his hairline? That is a widow's peak. Again, the reason why I'm talking about this is that word shows up in tests and quizzes, and I don't want you to be like, I have no idea what that is. That's that little V shape right there. And no, girls, I'm not going to stay on here so you can take notes a little longer as you stare at Thor and fawn all over him. We're going to move on. There we go. A cleft chin. Now, I used the most ridiculous example that I could find of a cleft chin. A little one. A little bit. Right? In the first class, a small, tiny cleft chin. No one's going to have one that looks like this. This is like the most over-exaggerated version of a cleft chin out there. But again, it's just a dimple in your chin. It's inherited. It comes from your parents. Now, we need to talk about learned behaviors. Now, Knox, learned behaviors reminds me of some other vocabulary words like salt water. Salt water is water with salt. Guess what learned behaviors are? Behaviors that you learn. There you go. That's a really tough definition. All right, so learned behaviors are exactly what they sound like. They are behaviors that are learned. Tying your shoe, reading, writing, singing, playing sports, using a computer. Hopefully, eventually, before second quarter's over, being quiet in class while the teachers are talking. We shall see how that goes in this class. All right, acquired traits. Acquired traits are things that happen to you after birth, right? As cool as Finley is, he could not be born with a tattoo, right? As much as I love her hair, there is no way that anybody in here would be able to be born. Like Josie can't be born with hair that looks like the lady here. You can do your hair like that, but you can't be born that way. That's acquired after. No one is born with a scar. Scars happen from your environment, right? Now, your hairstyle, not your hair color and the natural waviness of your hair, how we comb our hair, you are not born that way. You have to style your hair that way. That's very important to notice the difference in those. Calluses on your hand. Who knows what that means? What do calluses mean? What are calluses on your hand? Calluses are like rough spots. If you work with your hands a lot on a daily basis, you get rough spots on your hand. Those are calluses. You were not born with those. Those are not passed on to your offspring. All right, so we talked about acquired traits that usually happen to us after we are born. We'll watch this video together. We're not going to watch much of that video at all. And that's 24. I don't know what that is. 25, 26, 27. Still nothing. And then our last vocabulary word, instinct. These are things that they're inherited, but you're born knowing how to do it. For example, spiders and building webs, they know how to do that. Bears and hibernation, they already know how to do that. Beavers, when they build a dam, no one had to take them to like beaver school and teach them how to do that. They're born with that knowledge. Birds and flying, they know how to do that already. Like no one has to teach them to do that. Some of the things that we do is like innate. It's inside of us. Like wild animals protecting their young, or even moms like humans taking care of their young, is an instinctual thing. You were born with that. It's not something that you learn. It's something that you do automatically. That'll be the last vocabulary word that I write down on the anchor chart today. And I guess this is it for the video too. So it's time for us to smash the like button and subscribe.